Mom, I need you to handle Christmas dinner this year. It'll be 15 people from Jason's family, and you know how you cook. Emma's voice sounded casual over the phone, as if she were asking me, Dorothy Mitchell, to pick up milk from the grocery store. I'm 72 years old, and I felt the world pause for a moment as I processed my daughter's words. 72 years of life, 45 years of marriage, 30 years a widow, and now this. 15 people, Emma. And why do I have to take care of everything? I asked, gripping the phone until my knuckles turned white. From the other end of the line, I heard Emma sigh impatiently, like a spoiled child throwing a tantrum. Oh, Mom, because you have free time. We work all day. Besides, Jason's house is too small to host his entire family. Yours is perfect. It has that big dining room and spacious kitchen, and let's be honest, no one cooks turkey like you do. I closed my eyes and leaned against my kitchen wall. The same kitchen where I had prepared thousands of meals for Emma when she was little, where I had waited up when Emma came home late from teenage parties, where I had cried silently after my husband's funeral. It was as if my daughter had completely forgotten who was the mother and who was the daughter. Emma, honey, I'm not a domestic worker. I'm your mother. Please, Mom, don't be dramatic. It's just a family dinner. You can buy everything and I'll give you the money afterward. Jason already talked to his mom, Linda, and she's bringing the desserts. You just need to take care of the main course, side dishes, appetizers, and clean the house before and after. You know, the usual. The usual. I felt a bitter laugh rise in my throat. When had it become normal for me to be the servant of my own family? When had I accepted being treated as if my time, my energy, my dignity were worth nothing? And Mom, one more thing. Jason's family is a bit particular about food, nothing too spicy. Aunt Beverly can't eat gluten, Cousin Andrew is vegetarian, and Jason's grandmother only eats very well done meat. Oh, and we need red wine, but not too expensive because it's a lot of money in the end. I remained silent, feeling each word from Emma like a slap. It wasn't just the Christmas dinner. It was a lifetime of small humiliations that had accumulated like raindrops into a storm. It was the 15 people said so naturally, as if preparing food for 15 demanding strangers was as simple as boiling water for tea. And what are you going to do, Emma, while I'm cooking for your husband's entire family? Oh, Mom, I'll be there helping, of course. I'll set the table and serve the drinks. Jason will be busy tending to his family. You know how these family gatherings are. I felt something break inside my chest. It wasn't my heart. It was something deeper. It was my patience, my infinite capacity to say yes, my need to be the perfect mother who never caused problems. For 72 years I had been the woman who solved everything, adapted to everything, who smiled even when my world was falling apart. Emma, I have a question for you. When was the last time Jason and his family invited me to something? When was the last time they treated me like the grandmother of their future children, and not as the free domestic worker? Mom, don't start that. They appreciate you very much. It's just, well, you know how Jason is with his things. He's shy. Jason, who had never had trouble borrowing money when he needed to fix his car. Jason, who had never been shy about letting me pay for dinner when the four of us went out together. Jason, who had never been shy about using my house as a free hotel when his parents visited from out of town. All right, Emma. I understand perfectly. My voice had changed. It no longer sounded like the usual understanding and available mother. It sounded cold, calculated, different. Emma seemed to notice because her tone became sweeter, more manipulative. That means yes, Mom. You'll take care of everything. I promise it's going to be a beautiful Christmas, and everyone will remember how amazing you are at cooking. I looked out my kitchen window at the garden I had cared for decades, the roses I had planted when Emma was a child, the rusty swing where I had pushed my granddaughter who now lived in another city and barely called. My whole world had become small, reduced to being useful to others. Emma, my love, I have news for you. Your husband and his relatives are coming for Christmas. Perfect. Then I'm going on a trip, and you can take care of everyone because I'm not a babysitter, much less an employee. The silence on the other end of the phone was deafening. I could almost hear my daughter's panicked thoughts. I imagined Emma's pale face, her eyes wide with horror at the possibility of having to organize a dinner for 15 demanding people herself. "What? Mom? You can't be serious. A trip? Where? With whom? Mom, this is ridiculous. Everything is already planned. Everything is planned by you, Emma." Without asking me if I wanted to be part of those plans, I hung up the phone with trembling hands and stared at the receiver as if it were a strange object. For the first time in decades I had said no. For the first time in my life I had set boundaries, and the feeling was as terrifying as it was liberating. I walked slowly toward my living room where photographs of a lifetime watched me from the shelf. There was Emma at 5 years old in her pink polka dot dress, smiling toothlessly in the garden. There was my late husband, William, handsome and young in his military uniform before life hit us with bills, illnesses, and disappointment. There were photos of Emma's first Christmases, when I believed that being a mother was all I needed to be happy. When had all this begun? When had I stopped being Dorothy, the woman with her own dreams and desires, to become simply Emma's mom? I remembered the day William died 30 years ago. Emma was barely 15 years old, and I promised myself that I would be both father and mother, that my daughter would never lack anything, and I kept that promise. I worked double shifts at the factory, until my hands became rough and my shoulders stooped. I sold my wedding jewelry to pay for Emma's college. I gave up the possibility of falling in love again, because Emma needed stability. I swallowed my loneliness for 30 years because my daughter was the most important thing. When Emma married Jason 5 years ago, I thought I could finally live a little for myself, that my daughter, now adult and established, would no longer need so much from me. How naive I had been. The first favor came 2 months after the wedding. "Mom, can you lend us $2,000 for the down payment on Jason's car? We'll pay you back next month." Next month never came, but more favors did. "Mom, can you watch the house while we're on a late honeymoon in Cancun? Mom, can you host Jason's parents when they visit? Our house is too small." And I always said yes, always smiled, always available. I walked to my bedroom and opened my nightstand drawer, where I kept my important documents. There was the notebook where I recorded all family expenses. For years, I had kept meticulous records, not out of distrust, but out of habit, as a working woman who knew the value of every cent. The numbers hit me like a punch to the stomach. In the last 5 years, I had spent over $15,000 on Emma and Jason. $15,000 that had come from my pension, from my lifelong savings, from the money I had saved for my own medical expenses when I got older. Jason's birthday dinner, $750. Emma's car repair, $800. Christmas shopping for the whole family, $950. Flights for Emma and Jason to visit the in-laws, $600. Emma's rent when Jason lost his job, $1,200 for 3 months. And never, not once, had they asked how I was, if I needed anything, if I had enough money for my medications, or to fix the leaky roof that I had been ignoring for 2 years, because I preferred to prioritize Emma's emergency. I sat on the edge of my bed, and for the first time in years, allowed myself to cry. I didn't cry out of sadness. I cried out of rage. Rage at Emma for taking me for granted. Rage at Jason for treating me like a free domestic worker. But most of all, rage at myself for letting this happen. The phone rang. It was Emma again. "Mom, please, you can't do this to me. I already told Jason you were going to cook. He already invited his whole family. What am I going to do now? I don't even know how to cook for so many people." "Learn," I replied with a calm I didn't know I possessed. "Mom, this is absurd. Cancel that ridiculous trip. Where are you going to go alone? With what money? Let's be realistic. You can't travel alone at your age. At my age." As if being 72 had automatically turned me into an invalid who needed permission to make my own decisions. As if being a grandmother forced me to forever give up being a woman with my own desires. "Emma, I have enough money to travel, the same money I've been spending on you for years." "What are you talking about? We've never asked you for money." The lie was so blatant that I felt nauseous. Had Emma really forgotten all the loans she never repaid, or had she simply decided they didn't count because they came from her mother? "Emma, I have all the receipts, All the proof, every cent I've spent on you for 5 years, is documented. Silence, then Emma's voice, smaller, more insecure. Mom, that's different. We're family. Families help each other. You're right, my love. Families help each other. When was the last time you helped me? More silence. I knew Emma was desperately doing a mental inventory, trying to remember some gesture of generosity toward her mother. She wouldn't find it, because it didn't exist. I'm always here for you, Mom. I always call you. You call me when you need something. There's a difference. The truth hung in the air like an accusation. I got up and walked to my window, looking at the street where I had lived for 40 years. The same street where I had raised Emma, where I had mourned William's death, where I had grown old, waiting for someone to treat me with the respect I deserved. Tomorrow, I'm going to the travel agency, I finally said, and you're going to have to figure it out yourself. That night, I couldn't sleep. I lay awake, staring at my bedroom ceiling, listening to the familiar sounds of my house, the hum of the old refrigerator, the persistent drip from the bathroom I had never fixed, because there was always something more urgent to pay for, the creak of the old timbers settling with the years. At 3 o'clock in the morning, I got up and walked to the kitchen. I brewed a cup of chamomile tea, the same kind I used to make Emma when she was little, and had nightmares. How ironic that now it was I who had nightmares. But my nightmares were real and had names. They were called ingratitude, emotional abuse, and the terrible feeling of having wasted 30 years of my life being the person everyone needed but no one valued. I sat at the kitchen table with my steaming cup and began to remember, not the sweet memories I had been feeding for years, but the others, the ones I had buried deep because they hurt too much. I remembered the first time Emma had made me feel small. It was 3 years ago, at my neighbor's baby shower. Emma had arrived late as always, and when someone commented on how elegant I looked in my new dress, Emma had said, "Oh yes, Mom bought new clothes. I hope she didn't spend too much." You know how elderly people are with money. Elderly people, as if being old was synonymous with being irresponsible, as if my 72 years of experience working and managing money meant nothing compared to Emma's 28 years living from favor to favor. I remembered the day Jason had eaten at my house for the first time when he had just started dating Emma. I had cooked for hours, chicken with green sauce, saffron rice, refried beans, handmade tortillas, 3 different types of salsa. Jason had eaten without looking up from his plate, without a thank you or a "this is delicious." In the end, he had audibly burped and said, "It's all right, but my mom Linda puts more chili in hers." Emma had laughed. My own daughter had laughed at the insult to her mother. I remembered all the Christmases when I had cooked for 10, 12, 15 people for Jason's family, while they sat in my living room, watching television and criticizing everything. The house was too cold, the music too loud, the decorations too simple, and Emma never defended me. I remembered the day I had to go to the emergency room, because I had deeply cut my hand while cooking for Jason's birthday. Emma had arrived at the hospital 2 hours later, not because she had been busy, but because she had been at the beauty salon. Oh Mom, was all that drama necessary? It's just a few stitches. Just a few stitches, as if her mother's pain was always just something insignificant. I remembered when I had sold William's engagement ring, the only valuable keepsake I had of my late husband, to lend Emma $3,000 when Jason had lost his job. Emma had promised to pay me back in 3 months. That had been 2 years ago. I remembered the time I had been sick with the flu for a week, so ill I could barely get out of bed, and Emma hadn't come to see me even once. But the same day I felt better, Emma had called me to ask me to water the plants at her house, because they were going on a romantic weekend getaway, and I remembered with a clarity that surprised me the exact moment when I had stopped being a person to become a function. It had been the day of Aunt Helen Mitchell's funeral, William's sister. I had been crying because I terribly missed my sister-in-law, with whom I had shared so many years of confidences and laughs. Emma had approached, but not to comfort me. She had approached to whisper in my ear, "Mom, stop crying so much. People will think you're overreacting. Besides, I need you to go early tomorrow to pick up my dress from the dry cleaner. I need you to go. Not, could you or would you mind, I need you to go," as one tells an employee. My tea had grown cold in my hands, but I hadn't noticed. I was too busy processing 30 years of small deaths, small humiliations, moments when I had swallowed my dignity to maintain family peace. The phone rang again. It was 4 in the morning. Mom. Are you awake? I can't sleep thinking about this. Jason is furious with me. He says, how am I going to sort out dinner? His parents already bought their plane tickets. You can't do this to me. Emma's voice sounded desperate, but I no longer felt the automatic urge to rescue her. For the first time in my life, my daughter's problems sounded like problems my daughter had created and that my daughter could solve. Emma, it's 4 in the morning, I know, but I just can't sleep. Mom, please, let's be reasonable. We can find a solution. What if I pay for all the ingredients? What if I help you more in the kitchen? As if the problem was the amount of help and not the fundamental fact that they had planned to use my house, my time, my energy, and my money without even asking if I agreed. But our house is too small, then rent a hall. That costs money. And my time, my house, and my work don't cost money, do they? Silence, a long heavy silence that held 30 years of unspoken truths. Mom, I don't know what's wrong with you lately. You're being very strange, very selfish. Selfish, the word every woman who dares to set boundaries hears sooner or later, the word used to make women feel guilty for having their own needs. Emma, I'm hanging up now, and don't call me again until you've found a solution that doesn't involve me. Mom. I hung up the phone and unplugged it from the wall. The silence that followed was the most beautiful I had heard in years. The next morning I woke up with a strange feeling in my chest. At first I thought it was anxiety, but after a few minutes I realized it was something I hadn't felt in decades. Freedom. For the first time in 30 years, I didn't have to wonder what Emma needed, what problem I had to solve, what sacrifice I had to make. I dressed carefully, choosing my favorite cream blouse, the one Emma always criticized, saying it made me look too old. I combed my hair in front of the mirror, and for the first time in years, truly looked at myself, not to look for wrinkles or gray hairs to conceal, but to recognize myself. There stood Dorothy Mitchell, 72 years old, widow, mother, but above all a woman. I walked towards downtown with firm steps. Every block I covered felt like a declaration of independence. The travel agency was on Main Street between the pharmacy where I bought my medications and the bakery where I had bought bread every day for 40 years. Good morning, ma'am. How can I help you? The young woman behind the counter had a genuine smile, not the forced smile I had learned to recognize in people who saw me only as someone's grandmother. I want to take a trip for Christmas. How wonderful. Do you have a destination in mind? Are you traveling with family? I'm traveling alone and I want to go as far away from here as possible. The agent, whose name was Sophie Turner according to her badge, showed no surprise or pity. She simply opened her computer and began to show me options. We have some beautiful packages for solo traveler. Are you interested in beaches, mountains, historic cities? I looked at the photographs Sophie showed me. White sand beaches in Cancun, snowy mountains in Switzerland, cobblestone streets in Spain. For years I had only seen these places in magazines I flipped through in the doctor's waiting room, thinking they were dreams for other people, for people who had the right to be happy. How much money are you planning to spend? Sophie asked gently. I thought of the $15,000 I had documented in my notebook. $15,000 I had given without thinking, without asking for anything in return, believing that love was bought with sacrifice. I have $5,000, and as I said it, I realized it was the first time in years I was talking about my money, not the money I had to set aside for Emma's emergencies. Sophie smiled more broadly. With $5,000, we can do something incredible. How about a tour of Spain and Italy? 3 weeks, visiting Madrid, Barcelona, Rome, Florence, hotels with history, meals included, guides who speak English. It's perfect for someone who wants to rediscover themselves. Rediscover myself. The word resonated in my chest like a bell. When was the last time I had done something just to rediscover myself? I'm interested. When would it depart? We have a departure on December 20th. You would return on January 10th. Exactly during the Christmas holidays. Exactly when Emma expected me to be cooking for 15 strangers in my own house. The irony was so perfect that I almost laughed. Do you need to think about it? Sophie asked, No, I replied without hesitation. I want to book that trip right now. As Sophie prepared the documents, I felt a mixture of terror and euphoria. It was the most impulsive decision I had ever made, but also the one that made the most sense. For the first time, I was choosing my own happiness over the expectations of others. I need a copy of your passport and a credit card for the deposit, Sophie said. I took my passport from my purse. It was valid because I had renewed it last year with the secret hope of someday using it. Emma had scoffed when she found out. Why are you renewing your passport, Mom? Where are you going to go? To Spain and Italy. I thought with a smile. I'm going to Spain and Italy. When I left the travel agency with my ticket in hand, I felt like a different woman. It wasn't just the trip, it was what the trip represented. The decision to live for myself. My cell phone rang. It was a message from Emma. Mom, Jason says if you don't cancel that ridiculous trip, he's going to tell his whole family you're selfish and ruined Christmas. Is that what you want? I read the message twice. The first time with the old instinct of panic and guilt. The second time with a new cold clarity. Jason, who had never worked more than 6 months in a row. Jason, who had lived in my house for 3 months without paying rent. Jason, who ate my food, used my electricity, my water, my internet, and now had the audacity to call me selfish. I typed a clear reply. Tell Jason he can tell his family whatever he wants. I'll be in Europe, so I won't hear him. The reply came immediately. Europe? Are you crazy? With what money? With my money, I wrote, and then, after a moment's thought, I added, the same money I've been spending on you for years. My phone started ringing immediately. Emma was calling me. I looked at the screen, saw my daughter's name, and for the first time in my life, decided not to answer. I turned off the phone and put it in my purse. I had more important things to do than listen to reproaches and manipulation. I had to buy luggage. I had to check what clothes to take to Europe in December. I had to start living the life I had been postponing for 72 years. As I walked toward the luggage store, I felt lighter with each step. It was as if I had been carrying an invisible backpack full of stones for decades and had finally taken it off. For the first time in 30 years, I had something to look forward to, and it had nothing to do with making someone else happy. For the next 3 days, I kept my phone off, not because I was afraid of Emma's calls, but because I had discovered something wonderful. Silence. The silence of not having to explain my decisions to anyone. The silence of not having to justify why I deserved to be happy. I spent those days preparing for my trip like a teenager preparing for her first date. I bought a new suitcase, wine red, elegant, and practical. I bought clothes I had never dared to wear. A stylish beige coat that made me look sophisticated, brightly colored scarves, comfortable but pretty shoes for walking on European streets. At the downtown bookstore, I bought a guide to Spain and Italy and spent hours studying the maps, marking the places I wanted to visit. The Prado Museum in Madrid, where I would see for the first time the paintings I had admired in books for years. The Sagrada Familia in Barcelona, that impossible church that seemed straight out of a dream. The Colosseum in Rome, where I would imagine the lives of people who had existed 2,000 years ago. The canals of Venice, where I would have a coffee while watching the gondolas pass by. For the first time in decades, I had something of my own to plan, something that did not involve the well-being of anyone but myself. On the 4th day, I decided to turn on my phone. I had 47 missed calls from Emma, 12 voice messages, and 23 text messages. I read them all with a calm that surprised myself. Mom, answer the phone. Mom, this is ridiculous. You're acting like a child. Jason says if you don't change your mind, we're going to have to find another solution. Mom, Jason's family already bought their plane ticket. You can't ruin Christmas for so many people. I'm very disappointed in you. I never thought you'd be so selfish. Mom, please, I need you. The saddest thing was that for years that manual had worked perfectly on me. But not anymore. I dialed the number of my friend Grace Powell, the only person I knew who had always spoken to me honestly, even when that honesty hurt. Dorothy, where have you been? Emma called me yesterday asking if I knew where you were. She sounded hysterical. Grace, I need to tell you something, and I need you to be honest with me. They met at the corner cafe, the same one where they had met once a week for the past 10 years. Grace, at 74, was still the direct and unfiltered woman she had been all her life. She had been widowed the same year as I, but had taken a completely different path. She had learned to drive, taken painting classes, traveled with tour groups, and even had a couple of discreet romances. "You look different," was the first thing Grace said when she saw me. "You look more like yourself." I told her everything: Emma's call, the demand to organize dinner for 15 people, my refusal, the trip to Europe I had booked. Grace listened without interrupting, nodding occasionally until I finished. "And what do you think?" I asked. "Am I being selfish?" Grace laughed, a laugh that sounded like jingle bells. "Oh, Dorothy, do you know how many years I've been waiting for you to have this conversation with yourself?" "What do you mean? Sound familiar?" I felt my cheeks flush. Yes, it sounded familiar. I had used those same excuses for years to justify the unjustifiable. "Grace, do you think I'm a bad mother for going on a trip for Christmas?" "I think you're a woman who is finally learning the difference between being a good mother and being a useful mother. A good mother teaches her children to be independent, responsible, grateful. A useful mother does everything for her children until they forget how to do things for themselves." Grace's words felt like raindrops on dry ground. I had been a useful mother, not a good mother. I had solved all of Emma's problems until Emma had lost the ability to solve her own problems. I had given so much unconditional love that Emma had learned to take it for granted. But isn't a mother supposed to always be available for her children? "Dorothy, Emma is 33 years old. She's not a child. She's an adult woman who is married and has her own home. If at 33 she can't organize a Christmas dinner without her mom doing everything, the problem isn't you. The problem is you never taught her she could do it herself." But after William died, I wanted to do everything for her. And that was fine when she was 15. But you kept being everything to her when she was 20, and 25 and 30, and now she believes that's your job, that you exist to solve her problems. I remained silent, processing my friend's words. It was painful to recognize that perhaps I had loved Emma in the wrong way, that by trying to protect her from everything, I had made her incapable of protecting herself. "Grace, what do I do if she never speaks to me again?" "Then you'll discover if she really loves you or if she just loves what you do for her." The truth was simple and terrible. For years I had confused being necessary with being loved. I had believed that as long as Emma needed me, she would love me. But true love doesn't come with a list of requirements. True love isn't conditioned on usefulness. "Do you know what's the saddest thing about all this?" Grace asked. "Emma doesn't even really know who you are. She only knows the version of you who solves problems and gives money. She doesn't know Dorothy, the woman, the one who has her own dreams and deserves respect." For the first time in days, I felt like crying, but not out of sadness, but out of relief. Someone saw me. Someone understood that I was more than a maternal function. "Go to Europe," Grace said, taking my hand. "Go and rediscover who you are when you're not being someone else's mom." The next day, I decided it was time to confront the situation directly. I couldn't go to Europe with the weight of an undeclared war. I needed to talk to Emma face to face, one last time to set boundaries definitively. I turned on my phone and dialed my daughter's number. "Mom, finally. Where have you been? I've been so worried. Jason says you probably hit your head, and that's why you're acting so weird." There it was again. The false concern immediately followed by an explanation that made me look like a senile old woman. Jason, of course, had a medical theory about my behavior. Jason, who had never shown genuine concern for my well-being. "Emma, I need you to come to my house. We need to talk." "Talk about what?" "About canceling that ridiculous trip and sorting out Christmas dinner like adults. Come at 3 o'clock in the afternoon and come alone." "Alone? Why?" "Jason also wants to talk to you. He says you need to understand the reality of the situation." The reality of the situation. According to Jason, the man who had lived in my house for 3 months without paying rent, now wanted to explain reality to me. "Emma, either you come alone, or neither of you come. I'm not negotiating this, Emma arrived punctually at 3. But she wasn't alone. Jason was with her, wearing his typical expression of barely concealed annoyance. They walked in, without waiting for an invitation, and sat on my sofa as if it were their own living room. "Jason," I said calmly, "I asked Emma to come alone." "Dorothy, we're a couple. What affects Emma affects me." Jason used my first name, something he'd started doing a year ago to show we were peers, ignoring the fact that I was his mother-in-law, who deserved respect. "What affects Emma is a conversation between mother and daughter. You need to leave." Jason looked at Emma, waiting for her to defend him. When she said nothing, he stood up angrily. "This is ridiculous. I'll wait in the car, but this conversation needs to happen, Dorothy. We can't keep dealing with your selfishness." After he left, slamming the door behind him, Emma and I sat in silence for a moment. Emma entered with a look of annoyance, like a teenager who had been unfairly punished. She sat on the sofa with her arms crossed, radiating resentment. "Mom, this has to stop. You're acting like a spoiled child. The whole family is talking about you." "What family, Emma?" "Jason's family, who has never invited me to anything. The family who only knows me as the woman who cooks for free for their gatherings." "That's not true. They appreciate you very much." "When was the last time any of them asked me how I was? When was the last time they brought me a gift, or invited me to eat, or just called me to chat?" Emma opened her mouth to answer, but remained silent. Both knew the answer. "Never." "Emma, for 5 years, I've been your husband's family's unpaid domestic work, and for 5 years, you've been okay with that." "That's not true. We always treat you." "What?" "Emma, you've always treated me with respect, always considered my feelings, always valued my time." I got up and went for my expense notebook. I placed it on the coffee table, opened to the page where I had made the total. $15,000. That's what I've spent on you in 5 years. Money that came from my pension, from my savings, from the money I should be saving for my old age. Emma looked at the numbers with wide eyes. "Mom, we never asked you to keep track." "You're right. You never asked me to keep track. Nor did you ask my permission before spending my money. You just assumed it was available to you. But we're family. Families help each other. Tell me, Emma, how have you helped me in these 5 years?" Silence. A silence so profound you could hear the ticking of the wall clock in the kitchen. "I'm always here when you need me." "When have I needed you, Emma? Give me an example." More silence. Emma was desperately searching her memory for a time when she had given instead of received. "When you were sick. When I was sick with the flu last year, you didn't come to see me even once. I found out later you had been at the spa with Jason's friends." Emma's cheeks turned red. "It's just, I didn't know you were that bad. I sent you 3 messages, saying I felt very sick. You never replied." "Mom, you can't nitpick every little thing." "They're not little things, Emma. They're 30 years of little things that accumulated into a relationship where I give everything and you receive everything. And the day I decide to set boundaries, I'm the bad one." Emma began to cry. Not the genuine cry of someone who understands the harm they've caused, but the manipulative cry of someone who knows tears have worked before. "Mom, you can't leave for Christmas. You can't leave me alone with this problem." "Emma, you created this problem. You told Jason's family I was going to cook without asking me. You assumed my house, my time, and my money were at your disposal. This isn't my problem to solve. But I don't know what to do. I don't know how to cook for so many people. Learn, hire a catering service, order food. There are 100 solutions that don't involve me. That costs money, and my work doesn't cost money. Does it?" Emma wiped her tears and changed tactics. "Mom, if you do this, Jason is going to be very upset with me. He says if his family feels unwelcome, it'll be my fault. Then maybe it's time Jason learns to solve his own family problems, instead of delegating them to his mother-in-law. You can't talk about my husband like that. Jason is a 35-year-old man who has never organized a family gathering in his life because he's always had women do it for him. First his mom, Linda, now me. When is he going to grow up? Emma stood up from the sofa in a fury. I see what's happening. You're jealous because I'm not just yours anymore. You're jealous of Jason. The accusation was so absurd that I almost laughed. Emma, I'm not jealous of Jason. I'm tired of being his free domestic worker. You know what, Mom? Go on your stupid trip. We'll sort this out without you. And when you come back and feel lonely, don't come crying. Emma stormed out, slamming the door so hard the whole house shook. I stood in the middle of my living room, breathing deeply. For the first time in 30 years, I had said exactly what I thought, and the world hadn't ended. The following days passed in a strange calm. I expected to feel guilty. I expected doubts, remorse, the little voice inside telling me I had been too harsh with Emma, but that voice never came. Instead, I felt something I hadn't experienced in decades. I woke up each morning without the anxiety of wondering what problem of Emma's I would have to solve that day. I ate breakfast in silence, reading the newspaper from cover to cover, something I hadn't done in years because I was always rushing to solve some family emergency. I took unhurried walks in the park, observing details I had ignored for years. The autumn colors on the trees, elderly couples feeding the ducks, children playing with a freedom I had forgotten existed. One afternoon, while organizing my clothes for the trip, the doorbell rang. I expected it to be Emma, perhaps coming to apologize, perhaps coming to make one last manipulative attempt. But when I opened the door, I found Linda, Jason's mother. Linda was a 68-year-old woman, elegant and cold, who had always treated me with distant courtesy. In 5 years of knowing her, we had never had a conversation that lasted more than 10 minutes. Dorothy, sorry to come without warning, but we need to talk. Of course, Linda. Come. Linda entered and sat on the sofa with the rigid posture of someone who had come to perform an unpleasant mission. Dorothy, Emma told me about the situation, about your decision to go on a trip for Christmas. Yes, I'm going to Spain and Italy. It's something I've wanted to do for years. I understand you want to travel, but don't you think the timing is inappropriate? We already have everything planned. My family already bought their plane tickets. I studied Linda's face. There was no malice in her words, but there was that automatic assumption that others' plans were more important than my own. Linda, can I ask you something? In these 5 years, how many times has your family invited me to something? Linda blinked. She clearly didn't expect that question. Well, we've always appreciated you opening your home for family gatherings. That's not what I asked. I asked how many times you've invited me to something. To your house, to a restaurant, to a celebration where I was the guest and not the hostess. The silence stretched. Linda looked at her hands, clearly uncomfortable. Dorothy, we always thought you enjoyed being the hostess. You're such a good cook, and your house is so welcoming. Linda, for 5 years I've cooked for your family every Christmas, every birthday, every special occasion. I've spent thousands of dollars on food, decorations, gifts. I've cleaned my house before and after every gathering. I've washed mountains of dishes, and in 5 years, no one in your family has genuinely thanked me. But Dorothy, we always. Last year at Christmas dinner, your sister Beverly criticized my turkey, saying it was too dry. Your brother-in-law, Marcus, complained there wasn't enough beer. Your son Jason burped at the table and then fell asleep on my sofa while I washed the dish. Is that appreciation, Linda? Linda blushed. She clearly knew that everything I said was true, but she had never thought about it from the hostess's perspective. Dorothy, I hadn't realized. Of course you hadn't realized, because for 5 years all of you have seen me as part of the furniture at family gatherings. The woman who cooks, cleans and pays, but who doesn't have her own feeling. That's not true. Linda, tell me something. Do you know my favorite color? Do you know what kind of music I like? Do you know if I have hobbies, dreams, interests that aren't cooking for your family? Linda looked at me with wide eyes, clearly realizing she knew absolutely nothing about me as a person. I hadn't thought. Exactly. You hadn't thought. Because for your family, I'm not a person. I'm a function. Linda remained silent for a long moment. When she finally spoke, her voice sounded different, smaller. What can we do to fix this? Nothing, Linda. You can't fix 5 years of disrespect with an apology, and I don't want you to fix it anymore. But Christmas dinner. Christmas dinner can be at a restaurant, at your house, at Emma's house, or anywhere that isn't mine. For 5 years, you have taken for granted that my house was available for your gatherings. This year you will learn to make other plans. I know we've made mistakes, but don't you think cutting all contact is extreme? I'm not cutting all contact. I'm setting boundaries. I'm telling you that I'm no longer going to be your family's unpaid domestic worker. Linda stood up to leave, but before reaching the door, she turned around. Can I ask you something personal? Of course. Have you ever been happy doing all these things for us? The question hit me like a punch to the stomach, not because it was cruel, but because it was genuine, and the answer was devastatingly honest. No, Linda, I haven't been happy. I've been so busy being useful that I forgot how to be happy. Linda nodded slowly, as if finally understanding something important. I hope you find that happiness on your trip. After Linda left, I sat in my kitchen with a cup of tea. For the first time, someone from Jason's family had recognized that I had a right to be happy. It was a small step, but it was something. I looked at the calendar on the wall. 5 days until my flight. 5 days to leave behind 30 years of being the woman who solved others' problems, and start being the woman who lived her own life. The phone rang. It was Grace. How's everything, Dorothy? I think I'm finally learning the difference between being needed and being respected. And how does that feel? I smiled. A genuine smile that no one could see, but that could be felt through the phone. It feels like freedom. The day before my flight, I woke up with a feeling of anticipation I hadn't felt since I was a child waiting for Christmas. I had everything ready. My suitcases carefully packed, my documents organized in a special folder, the perfect clothes for every occasion I had imagined. But more important than all that, I had something I had lost decades ago: hope. I bathed calmly, chose my favorite dress, the terracotta color Emma always criticized, saying it made me look too flashy, and put on makeup in front of the mirror, not to look younger or to hide wrinkles, but to celebrate the woman I had rediscovered. Every line on my face told a story, and for the first time in years, I was proud of that story. As I ate breakfast, the doorbell rang. My heart skipped a beat, thinking it might be Emma coming to make amends. But when I opened the door, I found something completely unexpected. An older gentleman, elegant, with flowers in his hands. Mrs. Dorothy Mitchell? Yes, that's me. My name is Richard Foster. I'm Sophie's father, the travel agent who organized your trip to Europe. I looked at him confused. Why would Sophie's father be at my door? Sophie told me about you, Richard continued with a warm smile. She told me you're a brave woman who's going to travel on to Europe for the first time, and well, I'm also planning the same trip, the same dates, almost the same itinerary. I felt my cheeks flush. I was wondering if you'd like some company, not for romance or anything pushy, he quickly clarified, noticing the surprised expression on my face. Just to have someone to share a meal with once in a while, someone to take your picture when you're in front of the Leaning Tower of Pisa. It was so unexpected, so outside everything I had imagined for my trip, that I didn't know what to say immediately. For months, I had visualized this trip as my declaration of independence, my moment of chosen solitude. But there was this man, Richard, offering me something I hadn't considered: company without obligations. I don't know what to say. I wasn't expecting this. Sophie showed me a picture of you when you were at the agency. Not to invade your privacy, he hastened to explain, but because I had told her I hoped to meet interesting people on the trip. She told me you had a smile that showed strength and sadness at the same time. That description intrigued me. I truly looked at Richard for the first time. He was probably 75, with neatly combed silver hair, kind eyes behind elegant glasses, and a posture that spoke of dignity without arrogance. He was wearing a brown wool sweater and well-pressed trousers. He wasn't handsome in the traditional way, but there was something about him that radiated calm and respect. Can I ask why you're traveling alone? My wife died 2 years ago, cancer. During the last year of her illness, I promised her that if she left before me, I wouldn't stay home feeling sorry for myself. I promised her I would travel, that I would see places, that I would live for both of us. His voice softened. This is my first big trip without her. I felt an immediate connection to his story. Both were escaping versions of themselves they no longer wanted to be. Both were looking to rediscover themselves in distant places. And what do you hope to find in Europe? Richard smiled. I hope to find the man I was before I became just Helen's husband. I hope to remember what I liked to do when I wasn't taking care of someone else. The words resonated in my heart like bells. It was exactly what I had been feeling, but hadn't known how to express. Richard, I have to be honest with you. This trip is very important to me. It's the first time in 30 years I'm doing something completely for myself. I don't want to compromise it with romantic expectations. Oh, Mrs. Dorothy, he interrupted gently. I don't want complications either. I just want the possibility of sharing an intelligent conversation once in a while, and having someone tell me if I have food in my teeth after eating pasta in Rome. I laughed, a genuine laugh that surprised myself. It had been so long since I had laughed like that, without reservations, without worrying about how it sounded or if it was appropriate. You know what, Richard? I think I'd like that company. Seriously? Seriously, but with one condition. Tell me. Each of us pays our own expenses. No old-fashioned chivalry where the man feels obligated to pay for everything. I have my own money and I want to use it. Richard smiled more broadly. Mrs. Dorothy, I think we're going to get along very well. He gave me the flowers, white and yellow daisies, simple and beautiful, and left, not without first giving me his card with his phone number and the details of his hotel in Madrid. Not because Richard was a romantic interest. It was still too soon to think about that, but because someone had seen something more in me than a useful mother, or an available grandmother. Someone had seen an interesting woman. I put the flowers in a vase, and placed them on the kitchen table. Tomorrow I would be on a plane to Madrid, and for the first time in decades, I didn't know exactly what to expect. That uncertainty that once would have terrified me now excited me. The phone rang. It was Emma. Mom, your flight is tomorrow, right? Yes, tomorrow. There was a long pause. Mom, I don't want you to leave angry with me. I'm not leaving angry, Emma. I'm leaving free. I love you too, Emma, but I'm no longer going to confuse love with unlimited availability. After hanging up, I prepared my last dinner at home before the trip. Nothing elaborate. Just a simple soup and a salad. I ate slowly, savoring each bite, aware that tomorrow I would be dining in Madrid. For the first time in 30 years, I had something that was completely mine, a future full of possibility. 3 weeks later, I was sitting on a small terrace overlooking the Mediterranean in Barcelona, with a cup of café con leche that tasted exactly as I had dreamed it would. The late Mediterranean sun caressed my face as I wrote in a new journal I had bought in Madrid, something I hadn't done since I was a teenager. Day 21 in Europe. I wrote in careful script. Today I understood something important. Happiness is not a prize you receive after years of sacrifice. Happiness is a choice you make every day. If Richard approached with 2 ice creams, a lemon one for me and a chocolate one for him. During the 3 weeks, we had developed an easy and comfortable friendship. He was a perfect travel companion, cultured without being pretentious, funny without being a clown, attentive without being intrusive. We had laughed together when he tried to speak Italian with a Spanish accent, and ended up asking for shoes with cheese instead of pasta with cheese. Writing your memoirs? Richard asked, sitting in the chair next to me. Writing my new story, I replied, the one that starts at 72. My phone had rung several times during the trip, messages from Emma, some desperate, others furious, others manipulative. The first few days, I had read them all feeling pangs of guilt, but gradually, I had developed a new perspective. Emma's problems were no longer emergencies I had to solve, they were lessons Emma had to learn. The last message I had read, sent 2 days ago, was different. Mom, we had to cancel Christmas dinner. Jason and I had a big fight about who was going to take care of everything. In the end, we decided we weren't ready to organize something so big. His parents are disappointed with us, not with you. I think I understand a little better why you left. I hope you're doing well. I had read that message 3 times. I felt no triumph or satisfaction, just a quiet confirmation that I had made the right decision. Emma was learning, perhaps for the first time in her adult life, that actions have consequences, and that there wouldn't always be someone else to solve her problems. What are you thinking of? Richard asked, noticing my thoughtful expression, that for 70 years, I believed my worth as a person depended on how useful I was to others. I believed love was earned by being indispensable. And now I know that true love doesn't have to be earned. It either exists or it doesn't. And people who truly love you don't disappear when you stop being useful. Richard nodded. During the 3 weeks, we had shared many deep conversations. He had told me about the years he spent caring for Helen, how he had gradually lost his individual identity in the process of being the perfect husband. I had told him about 30 years of being the perfect mother, until I realized that perfection had made me invisible as a person. Do you know what's the strangest thing? I said. During this entire trip, I haven't cooked a single meal for anyone else, and I don't miss it. I thought I would miss it, but I don't. What do you miss? What? I miss the version of myself that existed before I became a maternal function. The woman who read books for pleasure, who had her own opinions about movies, who dreamed of traveling. That woman was asleep for 30 years, but she wasn't dead. The sun began to set over the Mediterranean, painting the sky with colors that had no name. Tomorrow would be my last day in Europe before returning home. But home no longer sounded like a prison. It sounded like a place where I could continue to be the woman I had rediscovered on this trip. Richard, can I confess something to you? Daconcepting to you? Daconcepting to you? Of course, it's up, Joe. When I was young, before I got married, I wanted to be an art teacher. I never told anyone, because it seemed like a silly dream. After I got married, after Emma was born, after William died, there were always reasons to postpone that dream. And now I think 72 years is not too late to be who I always wanted to be. Richard smiled. You know what? I have a confession too. I always wanted to learn to play the piano. Helen used to say we were too old to learn new things. What do you plan to do about it? I think I'm going to buy a piano. We laughed together, the laughter of 2 people who had discovered that life doesn't end when you turn 7, that perhaps in some strange way it's just beginning. That night, I stayed awake in my hotel room, looking out the window at the lights of Barcelona. Tomorrow I would return home, but not as the same woman who had left. I would return as Dorothy Mitchell, not as Emma's mother or Jason's former domestic worker. I would return as a woman who had learned that saying no wasn't selfishness, it was survival. My phone vibrated. A message from Grace. How's the new Dorothy? The new Dorothy is learning that it's never too late to start a new life. At the next day, on the plane back, as I watched Europe disappear beneath the clouds, I wrote in my journal, "Today I don't need permission to live. Today I know that respect is not begged for, it is demanded. Today, I understand that freedom is not doing what you want, but not doing what you don't want. And tomorrow when I land at home, I will begin the rest of my life." I closed the journal and leaned back in my seat. For the first time in 72 years, the future belonged entirely to me. It wasn't revenge, it was liberation, and it felt exactly like flying. 6 months after my return from Europe, I am sitting here in my new art studio, with hands stained with acrylic paint and a heart lighter than it has been in decades. I never thought that at 73 I would be learning to mix colors and discovering that I have a natural talent for painting landscapes. The house feels different now. It is no longer a place where I await desperate calls or unexpected visits, asking for favors. It is my sanctuary, my space, where every object is where I want it to be and every decision is mine. The silence no longer frightens me. It embraces me. There were tears, reproaches, mutual accusations, but something changed when I stopped defending myself and simply maintained my boundaries. She had to learn to relate to me as a person, not as a resource. She is still learning, but there is progress. She asks me how I am before telling me her problems. She invites me to lunch without expecting me to pay the bill. These are small changes, but significant. Jason. Well, Jason is still Jason, but he's no longer my problem. Emma is slowly learning that her husband's problems are her husband's responsibility, not her mother-in-law's. It has been a costly lesson for her, but a necessary one. Richard visits me once a week. We drink tea, share stories from our classes. He did indeed buy his piano, and is learning to play Chopin, and sometimes we go to the movies like two friends who enjoy each other's company without complicated expectations. I don't know if someday it will be something more, and for the first time in my life, that uncertainty feels beautiful instead of distressing. I have learned that self-love is not selfishness, it is emotional survival. For years I confused sacrifice with love, thinking that the more I gave, the more I would be loved. Now I understand that true love blossoms when both people respect each other enough to maintain their individuality. My bank account has grown. When you stop being the family bank, it's incredible how much money you save. I've used some of those savings to remodel my house, for my painting classes, for small luxuries I used to consider unnecessary. A monthly massage, new books, fresh flowers for my table, things that make every day feel like a celebration of being alive. The most surprising thing has been discovering that I wasn't invisible. I had simply stopped seeing myself. When I started to value myself, others also began to do so. My neighbors greet me differently. The butcher asks me about my paintings. The librarian saves art books especially for me. I have learned that setting boundaries doesn't destroy relationships. It either improves them or eliminates them, and both outcomes are good. Relationships that improve become more authentic. Those that are eliminated probably weren't worth keeping. Some days I feel sadness for the lost years, for the woman I was, who believed herself indispensable when in reality, she was interchangeable. But that sadness no longer paralyzes me. I accept it, embrace it, and then let it go. The past taught me the present belongs to me. I look at my hands as I write this. Hands that cooked thousands of meals for people who took them for granted. Hands that cleaned messes I didn't make. Hands that signed checks for others' dreams. Now these same hands create art, write their own thoughts, applaud personal achievement. The woman who boarded that plane to Madrid was a retired domestic worker who had forgotten her own name. The woman who returned is Dorothy Mitchell, artist, traveler, friend, a complete woman who doesn't need anyone's approval to validate her existence. I still wake up every morning without knowing exactly what the day holds, but now that uncertainty is exciting, not terrifying, because I finally learned the most important lesson of all, that I deserve to write my own story and that it's never too late to change the ending. What would you have done if you were in my place? Would you have stood your ground like I did, or would you have given in one more time? I'd genuinely love to hear your perspective in the comments below. Your story might inspire someone else who's struggling with similar family dynamics. If this resonated with you, please subscribe for more real-life stories about finding yourself, setting boundaries, and choosing your own happiness. Remember, it's never too late to reclaim your life and teach people how to treat you. Thank you for being here with me on this journey. Until next time.